old sow has been acting strange lately. Not only has her behavior become more human-like, she also keeps giving my brother shy glances. And every night, I hear strange noises coming from the pig pen. I'm really puzzled by all of this. But it wasn't until I saw my brother sneaking into the pig pen one night that I discovered the hidden secret behind it all. That day I was cooking in the kitchen. Suddenly, I heard my parents laughing outside. Curious, I peeked out. It turns out our only sow is pregnant. My parents think a wild boar from outside did it. Seeing the sow's large belly, they were overjoyed, thinking they could make a lot of money. But I only felt a chill down my spine, because I knew no wild boar had ever jumped into our yard. It was actually my brother, who sneaks into the pig pen every quiet night. Late at night, our backyard sow let out a pained cry. My parents got up quickly, pulling me up to help. They didn't call my brother Lin Yao, even warning me to keep quiet. If I woke him up, they'd scold me. But my brother was already awake, sneaking behind us. Near the pig pen, the cries had stopped. My parents knew the birth was over, and went to check how many were alive. My dad counting the piglets nursing on the sow. There were 7, not bad. He nodded in satisfaction. In the faint moonlight, I saw a baby's leg nestled with the piglets. Despite bracing myself, I stumbled back in fear. My dad's eyesight isn't great anymore, so he couldn't see clearly. He went closer and picked one up. It was a piglet with a human-like body. It immediately opened its pig-like mouth. "Grandpa, it hurts." Hearing that, my parents let out a sharp scream. The piglet was dropped to the ground. The sow immediately got furious, charging toward my dad. My parents stumbled out of the pig pen. After catching her breath, my mom said, "We can't keep this, it's too unnatural." My dad nodded in agreement. "If the villagers find out, we'll be laughed at." "I'll get a knife," he said. "Let's get rid of them while it's dark." My mom quickly urged, "Hurry, old man, we can sell the heads for some money." But as soon as she said that, my dad suddenly collapsed. Behind him, my brother stood holding a raised shovel. His eyes were bloodshot, his face intense. "Let's see who dares to touch my children." Seeing this, my mom cautiously stepped back, saying, "Dear son, how could those be your children? Don't scare your mom." The old sow moved closer to my brother. "I knew you both despised my Yue. Let me tell you," he said. "Yue has given birth to my children, and I will marry her." With that, he hugged the sow's face and gave her several kisses. "Yue, you're amazing. You've given me so many children at once. No one can stop us now. We're getting married right away." "No, darling," he said. "You're as beautiful as ever." To prove his words, my brother kissed the sow again. My mom and I watched in shock as my brother and the sow went back into the pig pen. Finally, my mom snapped out of it, slapping her thigh. "What a curse." Then she yelled at me, "What are you standing there for? Help your dad into the house. Girl, if you dare tell anyone about this, I'll have to punish you." Not long after, my dad woke up. My mom recounted what happened earlier. The two discussed and decided there was no point in hiding it anymore. They were going to call someone for help. At that moment, my brother staggered back from the pig pen. As soon as he entered, he glared at my parents. "Prepare the wedding for me and Yue," he demanded. "I'm telling you, Yue is a goddess who descended to earth. If you mess this up for me, I'll make you both pay." Seeing the situation, my parents exchanged glances. Then my mom cautiously approached my brother, saying, "Mom and Dad love you so much, our precious son. We'll give you anything you want. Just go rest for now. Mom and Dad will get it ready." After my brother went back to his room, my dad locked the door. Before leaving, he told me, "Keep an eye on him, don't open the door for him." As soon as daylight came, my parents left. After sleeping for a bit, my brother realized he was locked in. He started cursing, "Lin Xiao Xiao, have you grown bold, daring to lock me up? Just wait till I get out. You'll regret it." I didn't dare argue back, although my parents told me to watch him. If my brother really hits me later, it wouldn't stop him. My parents went to find a shaman. After a long silence, my brother finally said something unrelated. "Go bring some food to your sister-in-law." I knew he was up to something, so I brought some fresh food over. Our old sow, ever since she wandered back a year ago, the sow started acting strange since she came back. Her eyes didn't look like those of an animal. The pig pen was especially dark. Even standing at the doorway, I could clearly hear the eerie cries of a baby inside. Terrified, I quickly placed the food by the door. I didn't even close the door, and ran away. Once the food was delivered, my brother settled down and stopped bothering me. I hid in my room, locking the doors and windows. As the sun was about to set, my parents still hadn't returned. Once the sunlight disappeared, I looked up. and saw a huge pig's head, peering in through the window staring straight at me. I was startled, but it didn't seem hostile. It quickly turned away, and headed toward my brother's room. With a gentle bite the sow broke the iron lock. I shuddered, imagining what it could do to a person. My brother came out happily from his room, holding 2 piglets in his arms. He left with his wife and children. When my parents returned with the shaman, they saw the sow was gone. My brother was also missing. They immediately took their anger out on me. My mom grabbed me and yelled, "Lin Xiao Xiao, what did I tell you?" My dad, embarrassed with guests present, stopped my mom, but to scare me, they didn't let me have dinner. Late at night, too hungry to bear it, I quietly went to the kitchen to find food. But as I passed by the shaman's room, I heard a strange crunching sound inside. It sounded like bones being chewed. But I remembered clearly, because of the shaman's weak teeth, my mom had specifically prepared soft food for her. Driven by curiosity, I found a hidden spot and peeked inside by the moonlight. Inside the room, my brother had somehow brought the sow back. The sow was crouched on the floor chewing on something. I looked on, confused by the scene. Why were they in the shaman's room? Could it be? Suddenly, a horrifying thought flashed through my mind. Just then, a round object rolled to my feet. I looked down, and quickly covered my mouth in shock. Even though a chunk was missing, I could tell it was the shaman's head. My brother's voice became clearer. "Where's the head? That part has the most nutrients. Yue, eat more of it. It'll help you produce milk." Hearing that, I started to feel nervous. My brother came over. He'd surely see me, and I wasn't sure if one shaman would satisfy the sow. So I held back my fear, and kicked the head toward my brother. He picked it up, examined it, and cheerfully handed it to the sow. The sound of teeth crunching echoed in my ears. I don't know how long it lasted, but the sow finally finished eating. My brother dug a hole to bury the shaman's clothes. While he was distracted, I seized the moment, and quickly ran back to my room. The next day, when my parents didn't see the shaman, they saw my brother being unusually attentive. He led them to the kitchen, pointing to a table full of dishes, explaining, "The shaman left early after finishing her ritual." Then he wiped away non-existent tears. "Mom, Dad, I finally understand. You two are the ones who truly care about me. Don't worry, I'll be a good son to you from now on." Then he eagerly placed chopsticks in their hands. Usually my brother was always yelling at them, but now he was suddenly nice. They were so happy they didn't notice anything unusual. In the center of the table was a plate of pig head meat. It looked like a small pig, giving off a strange aroma. Some pig hair hadn't been shaved off, and there were red markings in some places. Its white eyes were wide open. Not sure if it was my imagination, but I felt like after we sat down, it seemed to move. My parents couldn't take their eyes off the meat. My brother kept serving it to them. Even I got a piece. With everyone watching me, I pretended to chew it, then spat it out when I had a chance. After the meal, my brother kept looking at the clock. When the time came, he said cautiously, "Mom, Dad, I'm going to bring Yue and the kids back." My parents hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Hurry, they shouldn't be running around after birth. Make sure she recovers well. Maybe she'll give us more grandsons." My brother smiled, but there was something unsettling in his expression. As he walked out, his back seemed hunched. I wanted to take a closer look, but my mom hurried me off to work. By sunset, while chopping wood in the backyard, I saw my brother returning from the hill, with the sow and a litter of piglets. Once they were back, my mom urged the sow to start cooking. "You lazy bones, what woman slacks off after giving birth?" When I had Yaozu, I didn't skip any chores. The sow grunted a few times, and my mom almost charged at her, but my brother stepped in front. "I'll do the work," I quickly agreed, eager to get away. I knew it, the meat was suspicious. They all seemed to be under its control. They treated the sow like a person, even understanding what she said. I carefully prepared the meal, not forgetting to set a bowl and chopsticks for the sow. This time I finally had a chance to count the piglets. Sure enough, there were only 6 left. Thinking about where the missing one went, even though I hadn't eaten it, I felt uneasy. At dinner, my mom looked at my brother with admiration. "Son, where did you buy that meat last time? It was delicious." Hearing this, my dad also looked at my brother. With eager eyes, my brother glanced secretly at the sow. "Found it up on the mountain. Leftovers from someone else." My parents looked disappointed. I pinched my thigh to stay silent. Last time there was only the pig's head on the plate. Who ate the body? Since then the relationship between my mom and the sow soured. She stood at the door daily shouting, "Lazy woman, eating but not working. Lazy bones. Lin Xiao Xiao, don't turn out like her. Hurry up and work." She didn't consider that a sow can't do much besides eating. But compared to the sow, my parents were acting more like pigs. Their appetites kept growing, and they lay in bed after eating, not doing any chores. The most they talked about each day was that delicious pork meal. Meanwhile, my brother's back was bending more, as if carrying something heavy. Since he came back, every night, I made sure to lock my doors and windows tightly, never daring to face the window. I often saw a large pig's head flash by. Tonight, just as I hid under my blanket to sleep, there was a knock on my door. Soft and then hard, the knocking continued against my thin door. I tried to pretend to be asleep, covering my ears, staying silent. But the person outside wouldn't give up. In the quiet night, the knocking was especially piercing. My parents next door seemed oblivious. I knew if I didn't respond, they wouldn't stop. After a moment of hesitation, I gathered my courage, and asked, my voice trembling, "Who is it?" The knocking stopped. Then a creepy laugh came through. My brother's voice followed from outside, sounding lifeless and robotic, as if he had lost his soul. "Lin Xiao Xiao, your sister-in-law needs a bath. Come help me." Despite my fear, I thought for a moment, and decided to open the door. My brother was standing stiffly at the doorway, his head hidden in darkness, his expression unclear. Suddenly a pair of red lights flashed, and then a pig's head came right up to my face, its tongue licking my cheek. Overwhelmed by terror, I screamed, scrambling backward in a panic. "Lin Xiao Xiao, why are you screaming? Why scream when you see me?" I shivered on the floor, but the familiar scolding brought me back to my senses. I looked up, and saw my brother at the door. His back was hunched again, allowing me to see everything clearly. I realized why his back had become bent. A piglet was clinging tightly to his neck, lying on his back, making a funny face at me. Its face was ugly, but it meant no harm. My brother, however, seemed completely unaware. He kicked me lightly. "Hurry up and help. You're as useless as ever. I should never have kept you." I quickly got up and followed my brother. Even though the sun had set, the curtains in his room were tightly drawn. In the center of the room was a large wooden tub, with the sow lying inside. 6 piglets lined up on the bed, stretching their heads to stare at me. My brother threw a towel at me. "What are you standing around for? Get to work. Finish quickly and leave." I knelt down, carefully wiping down my sister-in-law. "Baby, is this pressure okay? Are you satisfied? If she bothers you at all, don't hesitate to teach her a lesson." Hearing this made me even more cautious. But as I wiped her belly, I noticed an apple-shaped birthmark. That caught my attention. I had seen this mark on someone before. Memories flashed in my mind, and I left feeling uneasy. Without looking back, I rushed out of the room. Once back in my room, my mind was in chaos. I don't know when I fell asleep. Early the next morning, I heard loud commotion outside. I peeked out the window, and saw the village chief coming to collect. Every year the village chief collects from each household, no matter age or gender. Everyone has to provide one. Yes, what they collect are people. Our village has a rule. We don't keep idle people. If you have no contribution, you become the contribution. But times have changed since those early years. If it weren't for my parents' idea back then, they might have been dealt with by the village. Now the village was demanding my parents provide someone, or else they'd take my dad. No one was moved by my mom's outburst. She even got kicked. As they were about to drag my dad away, my mom stamped her foot. "Don't take my husband, take my daughter-in-law instead. She's worth more. Young women are the most valuable." The village chief listened, and told his men to release my dad. Then he led them to my brother's room to capture her. But when he saw my mom pointing at the sow, saying she was my brother's wife, the village chief slapped her several times, cursing as he went. In the end, it was my dad's uncle who intervened, and the village chief agreed to give us a few more days. Before leaving, he glared at my parents and said, "I see you two have plenty of flesh, but no brains." After the chief left, my parents, humiliated and beaten, lay on the bed without moving. They even made me bring dinner to their room, eating like pigs while lying down, though they seemed to have forgotten about the contribution. I couldn't forget. Today the chief threatened my dad, just to scare him. If they're serious about taking someone, it would definitely be me. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, and clearly heard the sound of the gate opening. I looked out the window, and saw the sow leaving. My suspicions about her kept me from feeling afraid, so I quietly followed her. Night was especially dark. Despite her large size, the sow moved quickly. Panting, I followed her through the midnight hours, all the way to the top of the hill. Looking at the desolate surroundings, I felt scared. But then, what the sow did next left me too shocked to feel fear. She reached the riverbank, stood up and sprayed a white liquid from her belly. This was the only water source for the village. I wasn't sure of its purpose. But it couldn't be anything good. I didn't wait to see what else she would do. I rushed down the hill, stumbling along the way. At home I hid the remaining water under my bed in a bucket, along with some dry food. From now on, I won't drink another drop of village water. Not even food cooked with it. Few days later, the village chief came for someone. He brought a lot more people this time, determined not to leave empty-handed. When he arrived, my parents actually had the nerve to ask why he was here. The village chief was instantly furious, calling them pig brains. Only then did they slap their heads in realization, and began to panic. At that moment, the sow came out of the house with a piglet. Seeing this, my heart pounded with fear. The village chief picked up the piglet, inspecting it. Though it was a little female, he seemed satisfied. Those eyes should fetch a good price. The reactions of the chief and his men showed they were also under its influence. Finally I felt a sense of relief. But seeing the reluctance in the sow's eyes, I didn't dare ask her why she did this. Was it to save me? That night, a shocking news came back. The village chief's group had an accident. No survivors. When my parents heard, they only complained about the lost money, then returned to their meal, with rice smeared across their faces. They didn't seem to notice. After finishing their own portions, they licked the food off each other's faces. But even so, they still looked unsatisfied. Their gaze on the piglets became more greedy. Since that day, my brother hadn't noticed a missing piglet, but his back kept bending further, forcing him to stop every few steps to rest. At night, I could see 2 piglets playing on his back. The next day, I was working in the yard, while my mom lay nearby sunbathing. The neighbor lady saw my mom, and started chatting with her. It seemed like small talk, but she was actually showing off. My eldest grandson can talk now. He's so smart. My mom rolled her eyes, and ignored her. The neighbor lady kept going. Oh my, having a grandson really makes a difference. I remember someone saying having no sons is like having no roots. Some people just didn't luck out with good daughters-in-law. What's the big deal about having a son, if he can't give you grandsons? Back when the neighbor lady had a daughter as her first child, my mom had mocked her openly and subtly. Now given the chance, the lady was determined to get even. My mom shook her head. So what? We've got septuplets. She held up her fingers, showing off. 7 babies. Have you ever seen that? The neighbor lady scoffed. All worthless mouths. You're proud of that? Lin family daughter-in-law. Face it, I told you that you'd end the Lin family line. If not, your husband wouldn't have. She shot me a glance as she said this. Finally she hit a nerve with my mom. My mom, with her large frame, charged like a cannonball. She pinned the lady to the ground, and the neighbor couldn't get free no matter how hard she tried. My mom beat her up, yelling, "I'll teach you to talk nonsense." Just then, the neighbor's husband heard the noise, and came to help. My mom's size was an advantage only against the lady. Soon the neighbor's husband had her pinned down and beaten. By the time my dad and brother arrived, my mom's face was bruised beyond recognition. Having lost outside, she came home and took it out on the sow. She rolled around on the floor, insisting that all the girls be sent away, demanding my brother to hurry up and have children, until a boy was born. My brother said nothing, and finally reluctantly, said the sow agreed to let the children go, but on one condition: she would take them herself. With her goal achieved, my mom didn't care who took them. At sunset, the sow left carrying a piglet. I stopped her, asking if she really had to let them go. She shook her head, and the piglet in her mouth even waved at me. I wiped my tears, watching them disappear into the moonlight. That night my brother took over the kitchen. Soon after, he came out with a plate of piglet head. This time there was more meat. After a month it had grown a lot. Even before the food was done, my parents burst out of their room, and pressed against the kitchen door, peering in. As soon as my brother came out, they snatched the plate. I watched as my parents eagerly stuffed the meat into their mouths, and my stomach churned. By the time they got to the last piece, there was one left. My parents fought over it, but my dad was stronger. He slapped my mom several times, and she fell to the floor, watching as he stuffed the last piece into his mouth. After they ate, their bellies grew, and they waddled back to their room like balloons. The next morning, before dawn, there was the sound of banging outside. Then people barged into my parents' room. Standing outside I looked in, and to my surprise it was the village chief's wife. She was with a few people I'd never seen before in the village. They surrounded my parents. Then the village chief's wife stepped forward. "That sow of yours is a demon. It's been bewitching everyone in the village. The one you handed over wasn't human. It was a little demon. It caused us to crash. My poor husband died because of it. It's all your family's fault." Hand over that demon pig right now. And then I'll deal with you later. Hearing this, my parents looked confused. What pig? We don't have any pigs. Everyone realized. My parents were too far under the spell to be saved. Without further words, they began searching the house. When they reached my brother's room, he was lying in bed holding the sow. Everyone gasped in horror at the sight. The village chief's wife directed her people to pull the sow away. Of course my brother resisted. Blocking their way, he fought with them, refusing to let go. When my parents saw my brother being mistreated, they joined the fight, using their large bellies to push people away. For a moment it was a stalemate. In the chaos, someone was pushed into the inner room. The next second, a piercing scream echoed. The person scrambled out of the room, his face as white as a sheet, his voice trembling uncontrollably, as he spoke to the crowd.